The sky above Kepler 442b burned orange and red. Smoke rose from the broken towers of the Rylani capital city. Una pressed her blue hand against the cracked window of the command center and watched her world die. 3 months ago, the Vorthak. Ships had appeared in their system like a plague of locusts. The insect-like aliens came in massive bioships that looked more grown than built. Their hulls were black and shiny, covered in spikes and weapon pods that pulsed with deadly light. The Rylani had tried to talk to them, to find peace. The Vorthak answered with death. Una closed her large silver eyes and reached out with her mind. Her telepathic abilities let her touch the thoughts of her remaining soldiers. 200 brave souls hiding in the ruins below. They were afraid but ready to fight, ready to die for their people. The Rylani had never been warriors. For thousands of years they built cities of crystal and light. They healed the sick and studied the stars. Their weapons were tools for mining and construction, not war. When the Vorthak came, they had nothing to fight back with. A young soldier named Kieran ran up to Una. His blue skin was covered in dust and his breathing was heavy. "Commander, the last evacuation ship just cleared the atmosphere. The children are safe." Una nodded. At least some of their people would survive among the stars. The ship carried 10,000 refugees to a hidden colony world. Maybe they could rebuild there. Maybe the Vorthak would never find them. The ground shook as another Vorthak biobomb exploded nearby. The aliens were getting closer. Una could see their dark shapes moving through the ruined streets. Some walked on 6 legs like giant ants. Others flew on buzzing wings, carrying acid weapons that melted through metal and stone. "How long until they reach us?" Una asked. Kieran checked his scanner. 20 minutes, maybe less. Their main force is pushing through Sector 7. Through the broken window, Una saw the massive shape of the Vorthak Queen's hive ship. It was bigger than their largest city, a living mountain of chitin and bone. Weapon tentacles hung from its belly like the arms of some ancient sea monster. The ship was descending slowly toward the planet's surface. When it landed, the Vorthak would claim their world completely. Una picked up her plasma rifle. It was a tool meant for cutting through rock, not fighting alien monsters. But it was all they had. Around her, the last defenders of the Rylani prepared for battle. They had mining explosives, construction lasers, and a few old defense drones that barely functioned. "Listen to me," Una said, her voice carrying to every soldier through their mental link. "We cannot win this fight. We all know that. But we can show them that the Rylani do not surrender. We can make them remember us." The soldiers stood straighter. Their fear was still there, but pride burned brighter. They were the last guardians of a dying race. They would not go quietly into the dark. Una led them down into the streets. The city that had once sparkled like a jewel was now a graveyard of broken crystal and twisted metal. Vorthak acid had eaten through buildings, leaving strange holes that dripped with green slime. The air smelled of death and alien chemicals. They took positions behind fallen debris and ruined walls. The mining explosives were placed at key points along the street. If they were going to die, they would take as many Vorthak with them as possible. The first aliens appeared around a corner. They moved like a swarm of insects, their black bodies reflecting the burning sky. Some carried weapons that looked like living creatures. Others had claws and fangs dripping with poison. They made clicking sounds as they communicated, a noise. That hurt Rylani ears. "Wait for my signal," Una whispered through the mental link. The Vorthak came closer. 50 meters, 30, 20. Una could see their compound eyes like black mirrors reflecting her face. She could smell their bitter scent, like rotting fruit mixed with metal. Now, the Rylani opened fire. Plasma beams cut through the alien ranks. The mining explosives went off in a chain of thunder and flame. For a moment, it looked like they might actually hurt the enemy. but there were too many. For every Vorthak that fell, 10 more took its place. Their acid weapons began to melt through the Rilani cover. Their flying units dropped bombs that exploded in clouds of burning gas. Kieran fell beside Yuna, his chest melted by alien acid. She caught him as he died, his last thoughts full of love for his family. Around her, more soldiers fell. Their brave last stand was becoming a slaughter. Yuna stood up and fired her rifle until it overheated. She threw it aside and picked up Kieran's weapon. The Vorthak were everywhere now, their clicking voices growing louder as they sensed victory. She looked up at the sky one last time. The stars were still there, hidden behind the smoke. Somewhere among them, Rilani children were safe. That had to be enough. The Queen's Hive ship was almost touching the ground now. Its shadow covered what was left of the city. Weapon pods along. Its hull began to glow, preparing to finish what the ground forces had started. Yuna closed her eyes and reached out with her mind one last time. She touched the thoughts of her dying soldiers, giving them peace. She thought of her people among the stars and wished them long life. She thought of the beauty her race had created and hoped someone would remember it. Then the sky cracked open. Blue. Light exploded above the city. Not the sickly green of Vorthak weapons or the orange glow of fires. This was clean, bright blue, like the color of deep ocean water. Rifts tore through space itself, holes in reality that hurt to look at directly. Yuna stared in shock as ships emerged from the rifts. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. Not the organic curves of Rilani design or the twisted bone shapes of Vorthak vessels. These ships were angular and sharp, made of gleaming metal that reflected the light. They moved with purpose and power. Strange markings covered their hulls, symbols that meant nothing to Yuna but somehow looked strong and defiant. The largest ship bore words in an alien script, UNSC Incheon and Korean Space Command. The newcomers did not hesitate. They did not try to communicate or negotiate. They simply began to fight. Beams of white fire lanced down from their ships, striking Vorthak positions with deadly accuracy. The insect aliens that had seemed so unstoppable suddenly found themselves under attack from above. Their clicking voices rose in alarm and confusion. Yuna watched in amazement as one of the alien ships opened a channel. A voice spoke in her language, translated by some unknown technology. The accent was strange, but the words were clear. "This is the Korean Space Command. We're here to help." For the first time in 3 months, Yuna felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Captain Hyun stood on the bridge of the UNSC Incheon and watched the burning planet below. His dark eyes were hard as stone. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for months, but seeing the reality of alien genocide still made his hands clench into fists. The holographic display showed the tactical situation. Red dots marked Vorthak forces. Blue dots showed the few remaining Rilani defenders. There were so many red dots that the blue ones almost disappeared. Almost, but not quite. "Signal from the surface, Captain," reported Lieutenant Borum from the communications station. "The Rilani commander is requesting assistance." Hyun nodded. He had been listening to the alien transmissions during their approach. The translation software that Earth's scientist had built was working perfectly. He could understand every desperate word from the dying defenders below. "Open a channel," Hyun ordered. "All frequencies." The young lieutenant's fingers moved across her console. "Channel open, sir." Hyun spoke clearly and slowly. He knew the aliens had never heard human voices before. "This is Captain Hyun of the Korean Space Command. We have come to help you fight the Vorthak. Hold your positions. Help is coming." On the planet's surface, Vorthak biofighters were rising to meet the human fleet. They looked like flying insects crossed with spaceships. Their wings beat the air as they climbed toward the stars. Acid weapons on their bellies began to glow with green light. "Incoming hostiles," called out Ensign Minsu from the sensor station. 200 fighters, rising fast. Hyun watched the alien ships approach. They moved in swarms, just like insects on Earth. No formation flying, no complex tactics. They simply rushed forward in a mass attack. Other alien races must have been easy prey for such simple strategies. But humans were not other alien races, all. "Ships, this is Admiral Taehyun," came the voice from the fleet's command ship. "Weapons free. Show them what human engineering can do." The human fleet opened fire. Magnetic accelerator cannons launched tungsten slugs at incredible speeds. The projectiles were simple metal rods, but they hit with the force of nuclear weapons. Vorthak biofighters exploded in balls of green fire as the slugs tore through their organic armor. Point defense lasers swept across the alien formations like deadly searchlights. Missiles with nuclear warheads streaked through space, their exhaust. Trails drawing white lines against the dark. The Vorthak had expected energy shields and sophisticated targeting systems. They found kinetic barriers and overwhelming firepower instead. In minutes, the alien fighter swarm was gone. Burning wreckage fell toward the planet like metal rain. Hyun turned to his weapons officer. "Commander Junho, target that hive ship. Full broadside." "Yes, sir. All cannons ready." The massive Vorthak vessel was still descending toward the surface. It was the size of a city, covered in weapon pods and armor plates grown from living bone. The alien queen inside probably thought she was safe in her giant fortress. She was wrong. 6 magnetic accelerator cannons fired at once. The tungsten slugs crossed the distance in seconds. They hit the hive ship's hull with impacts that registered on seismic sensors across the planet. Huge chunks of bio-armor spun away into space. Green fluid leaked from the wounds like alien blood. The hive ship stopped its descent. Weapon pods along its hull began to glow as it prepared to return fire. Streams of acid and bioplasma reached up toward the human fleet. The attacks splashed harmlessly against kinetic barriers. Human shields were not elegant energy fields like other races used. They were clouds of metal particles that absorbed and deflected incoming fire. Simple technology that worked against any weapon. "Their weapons are not effective against our defenses," reported the tactical officer. "Minimal damage to the fleet." Hyun allowed himself a small smile. Earth's military leaders had studied every piece of alien technology they could find. The Bucks Vorthak used biological weapons designed to eat through energy shields and sophisticated armor. Against human kinetic barriers and simple steel plating, their weapons were almost useless. "Signal all ships," Hyun ordered. "Begin ground assault. Operations." Across the human fleet, drop pods launched from the larger vessels. Each pod carried a squad of Marines in powered armor. The soldiers inside were veterans of Earth's wars, men and women who had fought in every conflict from the African rebellions to the Mars colony crisis. Sergeant Do-hyun checked his weapon one last time as his pod fell toward the surface. The magnetic rifle was a simple design, using electromagnetic fields to fire metal slugs at high velocity. No energy requirements beyond a small battery. No complex targeting systems, just point and shoot. Around him, his squad prepared for battle. Private Yunbi tested her plasma flamethrower. Corporal Jiwon armed her grenades. They were all young soldiers, but they had trained hard for this moment. First contact with hostile aliens would not be a peaceful meeting of minds. It would be a fight to the death. The pod hit the ground with a crash that would have killed an unarmored human. The Marines inside barely felt it through their powered exoskeletons. The door blew off in a shower of sparks, and they charged out into the alien city. Vorthak warriors were waiting for them. The aliens looked like giant ants standing upright, with 4 arms ending in sharp claws. Acid dripped from their mandibles as they clicked their hunting calls. They had just finished killing a group of Rilani defenders and were ready for more prey. They got more than they bargained for. Sergeant Do-hyun's rifle fired a stream of metal slugs that punched through chitin. armor like paper. Private Yunbi's flamethrower bathed an entire enemy position in superheated plasma. The Vorthak had never faced weapons like these. Their acid attacks bounced off human armor, while magnetic rounds tore them apart. More pods landed throughout the city. Soon the streets echoed with the sound of human weapons and alien death screams. The Vorthak, who had been preparing to celebrate victory, found themselves fighting for survival instead. In her command post, Yuna watched the battle with growing amazement. The strange aliens called humans fought like nothing she had ever seen. They did not retreat when outnumbered. They did not seek cover when under fire. They simply advanced and killed everything in their path. A human soldier appeared in her building. The armor made him look like a metal giant, but his voice was gentle when he spoke through the translator. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Mira of the Korean Space Command. We're here to get you to safety." Yuna looked at the human in wonder. Through her telepathic abilities, she could sense the alien's mind. It was different from any thoughts she had ever touched. Where Rilani minds were peaceful and calm, this human burned with controlled fire. There was anger at the Vorthak, determination to save innocent lives, and something else. Something that made Yuna's breath catch in her throat. Hope. This human truly believed they could win. "Why?" Yuna asked. "Why do you fight for us? We have nothing to offer you." The human lieutenant was quiet for a moment. Through the window, they could see more drop pods landing as the battle spread across the city. Vorthak positions were falling one by one to human assault. "Because it's the right thing to do," Lieutenant Mira said finally. "No one should die just because they're different." Above them, the Vorthak hive ship was burning. Admiral Taehyun's fleet had torn great holes in its hull with repeated bombardments. The alien queen's fortress was no longer descending toward the surface. It was trying to escape. It would not succeed. Human ships were faster and their weapons had longer range. The queen would die today, along with her dreams of conquest. For the first time in 3 months, Yuna felt something like peace. Master Sergeant Do-Yun moved through the ruined city like death itself. His powered armor was scratched and dented from 3 hours of constant fighting, but his magnetic rifle never stopped firing. Behind him, his squad of Marines followed through, the maze of broken buildings and twisted metal. The Vorthak had controlled this sector for weeks. They had built their hive clusters here, growing new warriors from captured Rilani genetic material. The aliens thought they were safe in their fortress, of living bone and acid-secreting walls. They were learning how wrong they could be. "Contact front," called Private Minho over the radio. 3 hive clusters, maybe 50 aliens. Do-Yun raised his fist, and his squad stopped moving. Through his helmet's sensors, he could see the enemy. Position. The Vorthak had dug into the ruins of what looked like a Rilani school. Strange organic growths covered the building like a cancer. Weapon pods pulsed with green light. Other alien races would have called for air support or waited for heavy weapons. Humans had a more direct approach. "Ji-won, take your team through the subway tunnels. Come up behind them," Do-Yun ordered. "Minho, set up overwatch on that tower. Everyone else with me. We go straight through the front door." Corporal Ji-won grinned inside her helmet. The woman had grown up in the underground cities of Seoul. Tunnel fighting was in her blood. She led her 3 Marines down into the broken subway system that ran beneath the alien city. The tunnels were dark and filled with strange smells. Vorthak biomatter grew on the walls like fungus. It glowed with a sickly green light that hurt human eyes. But the aliens had not bothered to guard these passages. They did not expect enemies who fought from below. Ji-won and her team moved quietly through the darkness. Their armor's sound dampeners made them almost silent. Motion sensors guided them toward the enemy position. The Vorthak above had no idea. Death was coming from beneath their feet. Meanwhile, Do-Yun led the frontal assault. His Marines charged across the open ground toward the hive clusters. Vorthak weapons fired streams of acid and bioplasma. The attacks splashed against human armor without effect. Kinetic barriers absorbed the energy, while ceramic plating deflected the chemicals. The aliens had never fought an enemy that simply ignored their best weapons. Do Yun's rifle fired in full automatic mode. Tungsten slugs tore through chitin armor and alien flesh. A Vorthak warrior with 4 arms and razor claws rushed at him. Do Yun put 6 rounds through its chest without breaking stride. Private Yunbi reached the nearest hive cluster and activated her plasma flamethrower. The weapon was designed for clearing enemy fortifications. It did its job perfectly. Superheated plasma melted through bioarmor and organic walls. The hive cluster began to collapse as its support structures liquefied. Vorthak warriors poured out of the burning building. They clicked and hissed in their alien language, probably calling for help. More enemy forces would arrive soon, but that was part of the plan. Below ground, Jiwan's team reached their target, plastic explosives attached to support pillars. Remote, detonators armed and ready. The corporal spoke quietly into her radio. Charges set, ready to bring down the house. Do it, Do Yun ordered. The explosions shook the entire district. 3 city blocks collapsed into the subway tunnels. The main Vorthak position simply disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. Hundreds of aliens died in seconds, buried under tons of rubble. The surviving Vorthak tried to regroup, but Private Minyo was waiting for them from his sniper position. His modified magnetic rifle could punch through alien armor at 2 kilometers. One by one, enemy commanders fell with their heads exploded by tungsten rounds. Without leadership, the Vorthak formation began to fall apart. Some aliens tried to retreat. Others charged the human positions in mindless fury. Both groups died, just as quickly. Human weapons did not care about alien emotions or tactics. In the command bunker beneath the city, Yuna watched the battle through her surviving surveillance drones. The humans fought like machines of war, but she could sense their thoughts through her telepathic abilities. They were not mindless killers. Each soldier carried deep anger at what the Vorthak had done to innocent people. Lieutenant Mira knelt beside a wounded Rilani child, using human medical supplies to treat acid burns. The woman's mind blazed with protective fury. She had seen too much death and suffering. The Vorthak would pay for every life they had taken. Your people, Yuna said to the human officer. They fight with such hate, but also with such love. Mira looked up from her patient. We've seen what the Vorthak do to civilizations. We won't let it happen again, not to anyone. Above ground, Specialist Yunji found herself surrounded by a dozen Vorthak warriors. Her squad had been separated during the fighting. Her rifle was empty and her sidearm was almost out of ammunition. The aliens clicked their mandibles and moved. Closer, acid dripping from their claws. Another soldier might have tried to surrender or negotiate. Humans did not negotiate with genocidal monsters. Yunji pulled out every grenade on her combat vest. Fragmentation, incendiary, and high explosive. She armed them all at once and smiled at the shocked aliens. For the children of Kepler 442b, she said, and charged into the enemy formation. The explosion could be seen from orbit. It took out an entire Vorthak platoon and cleared the way for friendly forces to advance. Yunji's sacrifice saved dozens of human and Rilani lives. Similar scenes played out across the city. Humans who threw themselves at impossible odds to protect alien civilians they had never met. Soldiers who used their own bodies as shields to save wounded Rilani defenders. Men and women who fought with a fury that shocked even their enemies. The Vorthak queen watched the battle from her damaged hive ship and could not understand what she was seeing. Her forces had conquered dozens of star systems. They had destroyed civilizations that were thousands of years old. How could these primitive newcomers be winning? She opened communication channels to other Vorthak fleets in nearby systems. Send reinforcements immediately. These humans are not like other prey species. But the human admiral was already won. step ahead. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching enemy fleets hours ago. More human ships were arriving through dimensional rifts. The Korean Space Command had brought their entire fleet to this battle. Captain Hyun studied the tactical display on his bridge. Signal all ground forces. Prepare for Phase 2 operations. Down in the city, Do-hyun received the orders through his helmet radio. Phase 2 meant taking the fight to the Vorthak's main strongholds. The aliens had built massive hive complexes in the ruins of 3 Rilani cities. Each one housed thousands of warriors and enough bioweapons to kill millions. It was time to end this. All units, this is Do-hyun. We advance in 10 minutes. Remember what we're fighting for. Through the smoke and fire, human and Rilani forces began to move. They had been defending for 3 months. Now it was time to attack. The Vorthak Empire had never faced an enemy like humanity. They were about to learn why that was a fatal mistake. In her command bunker, Yuna felt something she had not experienced since the invasion began. The tide of battle was turning. Hope was returning to her world, and it was bringing death to her people's enemies. The humans had arrived at the darkest hour. Now the light was beginning to dawn. Admiral Taehyun stood in the communications center of his flagship, watching signals pour in from across the galaxy. The massive display showed hundreds of star systems, each one marked with the status of its inhabitants. Red for Vorthak-controlled, gray for destroyed civilizations. And now, for the first time in decades, a few points of green were beginning to appear. Sir, we're receiving transmissions on all subspace frequencies, reported Communications Officer Haeon. The news of our victory here is spreading faster than we expected. Taehyun nodded. The galaxy had been silent for so long that many thought all resistance was dead. The Vorthak had crushed world after world, civilization after civilization. But now, species that had hidden in fear were beginning to hope again. He stepped up to the main transmitter. Open all channels. Maximum broadcast power. The young officer's hands moved quickly across her console. All frequencies open, sir. You're broadcasting to half the galaxy. Taehyun spoke in the calm, steady voice that had commanded respect during Earth's greatest wars. The translation computers would carry his words to thousands of alien races in hundreds of languages. This is Admiral Taehyun of the Earth Defense Force. The Vorthak Empire has been a cancer on this galaxy for too long. They have destroyed countless civilizations and murdered billions of innocent beings. Today, that ends. He paused and looked out at the stars through the bridge viewport. We call upon all free peoples to stand with us. The Korean Space Command and our allies will provide weapons, ships, and training to any species willing to fight for their freedom. The age of Vorthak terror is over. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hidden colonies throughout the galaxy began broadcasting their locations. Species that had been thought extinct revealed themselves. Resistance groups that had been fighting hopeless battles suddenly found new strength. Dr. Soo-jin monitored the incoming signals from her laboratory aboard the research ship Sejong. As Earth's leading expert on alien biology, she had spent months studying captured Vorthak specimens. Now her research was more important than ever. The bio-readings are consistent across all Vorthak forces, she reported to Admiral Taehyun. They're not individual creatures. They're parts of a collective organism controlled by their queens. The Admiral studied the data on his personal display. What does that mean for our strategy? It means they have a fatal weakness. Cut off the Queen's control signals and the entire swarm becomes confused and directionless. They've been winning through coordination and overwhelming numbers. Take that away, and they're just large insects. On the planet below, Master Sergeant Do-hyun was already seeing evidence of Dr. Soo-jin's theory. As human forces advanced toward the main Vorthak strongholds, the alien resistance was becoming increasingly disorganized. Groups of warriors that should have been working together were fighting as separate units instead. They're not talking to each other anymore, Private Minho observed as he watched Vorthak forces through his scope. Look at that cluster by the river. They're letting us flank them because the other group doesn't know we're here. Do-Yun smiled grimly. Human psychological warfare specialists had been broadcasting carefully designed interference patterns on Vorthak communication frequencies. The aliens' hive mind was being disrupted by static and false signals. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species were beginning to emerge from hiding. The first to respond were the Selenites, an aquatic race that lived in the oceans of 3 different moons. They had been thought extinct for 20 years. Captain Hyun received the transmission on his private channel. The voice was translated from a series of clicking and whistling sounds. Human Commander, this is Fleet Singer Nerida of the Selenite Resistance. We have 30 ships hidden in the Proxima system. We offer our bioelectric weapons to your cause. Accepted gladly, Hyun replied. Send us your fleet positions and we'll coordinate joint operations. The Selenites were followed by the Resonants, a silicon-based species that communicated through harmonic vibrations. Their crystalline ships had been hiding in asteroid fields for decades, but now they joined the growing alliance. Their sonic weapons could shatter Vorthak bioarmor from the inside out. Even the mysterious ethereals, energy beings that rarely contacted physical species, sent a message of support. They could not fight directly, but they offered to disrupt Vorthak quantum communications across multiple star systems. In the command bunker on Kepler 442b, Yuna watched the Galactic Alliance taking shape with growing amazement. Her people had always believed they were alone in their peaceful ways. Now she was learning that the galaxy was full of species who shared their values of life and freedom. How did you know? She asked Lieutenant Mira. How did you know that calling for help would bring so many allies? The human medic was treating a wounded Selenite soldier who had just arrived with the first relief convoy. We didn't know for sure. But on Earth we have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We figured there had to be other good people out there. The Vorthak Queen was beginning to understand the magnitude of her problem. Her empire was built on fear and isolation. She conquered species one at a time, making sure they could not unite against her. But the humans had changed all of that, with a single battle. She tried to negotiate, opening direct communication with Admiral Tae-hyun. Her words were translated by the same computer systems that carried his messages to the galaxy. Human Commander, you have shown impressive strength. The Vorthak Empire is willing to discuss terms. We will spare your worlds if you withdraw from this system. Tae-hyun's response became legend among a dozen species. We don't negotiate with genocidal parasites. Surrender unconditionally, or we'll hunt down every last one of your kind. The Queen's answer was to call for reinforcements from every Vorthak fleet in the galaxy. If these humans wanted a war, she would give them one that would drown the stars in blood. But Admiral Tae-hyun had been expecting that response. Human long-range sensors had been tracking Vorthak fleet movements for weeks. Every enemy ship was being monitored. Every stronghold was being mapped. Signal all Allied forces, he ordered. Operation Starfire begins in 6 hours. We're going to hit every Vorthak position in this sector simultaneously. The plan was ambitious beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human fleets would strike at 7 different systems at once, supported by alien allies and using captured Vorthak weapons against their former owners. It was a coordination effort that required perfect timing across light years of space. Engineer Yejun worked frantically in the weapons lab aboard the Incheon. She had been reverse engineering captured Vorthak bioweapons for weeks. Now she had something that might tip the balance even further. Captain, I've modified our magnetic rounds to carry Vorthak biotoxins, she reported to Hyun. The aliens' own poisons will eat through their armor from the inside. Technician Dong-yun had an even more ambitious project. Sir, I've cracked their quantum encryption. We can now intercept and decrypt all Vorthak fleet communications in real time. The pieces were falling into place. The galaxy had been dark for so long that many had forgotten what hope looked like. Now it blazed across the stars like wildfire. Species that had cowered in fear for decades were standing up and choosing to fight. The Vorthak Empire had built its power on terror and isolation. But humans had brought something new to the galaxy, the belief that ordinary people could stand together against impossible odds and win. On the surface of Kepler 442b, the last Vorthak stronghold was falling to combined human and alien forces. Sergeant Doyen led a mixed unit of Marines, Rilani defenders, and Selenite warriors through the burning ruins of the enemy fortress. The Hive Queen's personal guard fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "This one's for every world you destroyed," Do-hyun said as he put a tungsten round through the local queen's head. Above them, the main Vorthak hive ship was trying to escape, but human and alien ships surrounded it on all sides. There would be no retreat, no mercy. The first battle of the Liberation War was almost over, but across the galaxy the real fight was just beginning. The war that followed changed the galaxy forever. What had started as a desperate rescue mission on one dying world became a liberation campaign that spanned hundreds of star systems. General Minji stood on the observation deck of the battleship, Sol, and watched Allied fleets gathering in the Zerion Nebula. 6 months had passed since the first human ships arrived at Kepler 442b. Now, over 300 vessels from 40 different species formed a massive armada. Sleek human destroyers flew alongside crystalline resonant cruisers. Selenite bioships swam through space next to angular ethereal energy constructs. "Final fleet count, General," reported Colonel Dae-hyun from the tactical station. 312 ships total, approximately 50,000 Marines and support personnel from 26 species. Minji nodded as she studied the holographic display. Each ship was a story of liberation. The Selenite vessels had been hidden under ice for decades. The resonant cruisers had been thought lost until human forces found them drifting in deep space, their crews in hibernation. The smaller ships belonged to species that most of the galaxy had forgotten existed. "What's the status of our target?" she asked. "The Vorthak home system is heavily defended. Long-range scans show at least 500 bioships forming a defensive wall around their primary world. Intelligence suggests the main queen is there, coordinating their entire empire." Minji smiled coldly. The humans had learned much about Vorthak biology during the past months. Dr. Sujin's research had revealed that the aliens were not individual creatures at all. They were extensions of a few massive queen organisms. Kill the queens, and the entire empire would collapse. But getting to the queens would not be easy. The Vorthak homeworld was protected by the largest fleet they had ever assembled. Bioships the size of cities formed defensive rings around the planet. Living weapons. Platforms floated in space like cancerous moons. "Signal from Admiral Tae-hyun," called the communications officer. "The fleet is ready to begin final approach." The plan was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. The Allied fleet would charge directly into the Vorthak defensive formation. Human ships would lead the attack, using their superior shields and weapons to punch a hole in the enemy lines. Allied vessels would follow behind, protected by human armor and guided by human tactical systems. It looked like suicide. Many of the alien commanders had said so during the planning sessions. Only the humans seemed confident that it would work. Engineer Yejun had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Her team had modified every weapon in the fleet to use hybrid ammunition. Magnetic rounds now carried selenite biotoxins and resonant harmonic disruptors. When they hit Vorthak bio-armor, the shells would poison the living tissue while sonic vibrations tore it apart from within. Technician Dongyan had an even more ambitious surprise waiting. His team had been studying captured Vorthak communication systems for months, Now they could not only intercept alien messages, but send false ones as well. "General, we're ready to begin information warfare," he reported. "When you give the word, we'll flood their networks with conflicting orders and false tactical data." Minji looked out at the assembled fleet one more time. Ships that had been enemies just months ago now flew in perfect formation. Species that had hidden in fear for decades were ready to charge into the teeth of the galaxy's greatest threat. "All ships, this is General Minji. Today, we end the Vorthak Empire. For every world they destroyed, every species they enslaved, every child they murdered, today we bring justice to the stars." The fleet began to move. Human ships formed the spearhead, their angular hulls gleaming with weapon arrays and shield generators. Behind them came the alien vessels, each contributing their unique abilities to the combined assault. The Vorthak defenders detected the approaching armada when it was still an hour away. Bioships began moving into attack formations, their living, hulls pulsing with bioluminescent weapon pods. The main queen's voice echoed across every alien vessel, translated by human computers. "These upstart mammals dare to attack our sacred homeworld. Show them the price of defying the Vorthak Empire. Leave none alive." But the aliens had never faced an attack like this. As the fleets closed to weapon range, Technician Dongyun activated his information warfare systems. False orders flooded. Vorthak communication networks. Ships that should have been coordinating their fire instead attacked each other. Defense platforms turned their weapons on friendly vessels. The biological unity that had made the Vorthak so dangerous was turned against them. Without clear communication from their queens, individual ship clusters began acting independently. The perfect coordination that had crushed dozens of civilizations fell apart in minutes. General Minji watched the enemy formation dissolve into chaos and gave the order to attack. "All ships, weapons free. Show them what freedom looks like." The Kai, human spearhead, hit the Vorthak lines like a hammer blow. Magnetic accelerator cannons fired streams of hybrid ammunition that tore through bio-armor and poisoned alien flesh. Point defense lasers swept enemy fighter swarms from space. Nuclear missiles detonated in brilliant flashes that lit up the nebula. Captain Hyun led the destroyer squadron through a gap in the enemy defenses. His ship's weapons fired continuously as Vorthak biofighters swarmed around them. But the alien attacks barely scratched human armor. Acid and bioplasma splashed harmlessly against kinetic barriers, while tungsten rounds punched through chitin. "Hulls! Breakthrough confirmed," he reported to General Minji. "Path to the inner system is clear." Behind the human ships came the Allied fleet. Selenite vessels fired bioelectric weapons that fried Vorthak nervous systems. Resonant cruisers sang harmonic death songs that shattered alien armor like glass. Even the peaceful Rilani had armed their ships with human weapons and fought with desperate fury. Yuna commanded one of the Rilani vessels, her telepathic abilities coordinating the thoughts of her mixed-species crew. Human Marines worked alongside. Selenite warriors and resonant drones, different species, different biologies, but united in their hatred of Vorthak tyranny. "Target the hive clusters," she ordered. "Make them pay for what they did to our worlds." The battle raged for 3 hours. Vorthak bioships died by the dozens, their living hulls melting under concentrated fire. But the aliens fought desperately, knowing this was their last stand. If they lost here, their empire would die with them. The main queen tried one last, desperate gambit. She ordered all remaining ships to ram the human fleet, sacrificing themselves to destroy the enemy commanders. It was the kind of tactic that might have worked against other species. But humans had been preparing for exactly this scenario. Every ship in the fleet was equipped with emergency jump drives. As the Vorthak vessels charged forward, the Allied fleet simply disappeared. Dimensional rifts opened around the ramming ships, swallowing them up and depositing them in empty space light years away. When the fleet reappeared, they were inside the Vorthak defensive perimeter. The planet lay before them, a diseased world covered in hive cities and bioweapon factories. At the planet's north pole sat the greatest hive complex ever built, home to the Supreme Queen who had ruled the Empire for 1,000 years. All ships, target the primary hive, General Minji ordered. End this. The bombardment that followed could be seen from neighboring star systems. Hundreds of ships fired everything they had at the Supreme Queen's fortress. The hive complex was the size of a continent, but it crumbled under the massive assault. Living walls melted, organic spires collapsed. The Queen's death scream echoed across subspace frequencies before being cut short forever. Across the galaxy, Vorthak forces suddenly stopped fighting. Without their Queen's guiding intelligence, the bioships became nothing more than floating debris. The warriors that had terrorized countless worlds simply shut down, their biological functions failing without central coordination. In her command center, General Minji watched tactical displays as red markers across the galaxy began turning gray. Vorthak fleets were going dark one by one. The empire that had ruled through fear for a millennium died in a matter of hours. Signal to all allied forces, she said quietly. The war is over. Begin reconstruction operations immediately. But even as victory celebrations began across liberated worlds, Minji knew the real work was just starting. The Vorthak had left behind a galaxy full of devastated worlds and traumatized species. It would take years to rebuild what had been destroyed. Fortunately, humans were very good at rebuilding, and now they had the help of every free species in the galaxy. The age of Vorthak terror was over. The age of galactic freedom had begun. 6 months after the last Vorthak queen died screaming in the ruins of her hive complex, the galaxy was a very different place. Commander Yuna stood in the memorial garden on Luna, Earth's ancient moon, and watched children from a dozen different species play together under the artificial sky. The garden was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Crystalline monuments rose like frozen tears, each one honoring a species that the Vorthak had destroyed completely. The names were carved in hundreds of languages, including several that no living being could speak anymore. But between the monuments, new life grew in carefully tended beds of alien flowers. "The children don't understand what we lost," said a familiar voice behind her. Yuna turned to see Captain Hyun approaching through the memorial paths. The human commander looked older than when she had first met him. His dark hair was touched with gray now, and new scars marked his weathered face. But his eyes still held the same determined fire that had saved her world. "Perhaps that's for the best," Yuna replied. "They will build a future that we can only dream of." The two officers stood in comfortable silence, watching Rilani youngsters chase selenite children through pools of glowing water. Human kids taught alien friends how to play ancient Earth games, while resonant crystal beings hummed lullabies that made the flowers bloom brighter. The Galactic Liberation Alliance headquarters on Earth had become the beating heart of reconstruction efforts across known space. Every day, ships arrived carrying refugees, supplies, and requests for help. The humans coordinated it all with the same efficient determination they had shown in war. But Yuna knew the real work was being done on thousands of worlds by ordinary people of every species. Engineers rebuilt cities, doctors treated the wounded. Teachers helped traumatized children learn to hope again. The galaxy was healing, one small act of kindness at a time. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Captain Hyun suddenly. "The cost of this war?" Hyun was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the memorial garden held the names of billions of dead, but beyond its borders, the lights of New Geneva sparkled with life. The human city had been built specifically to house the Alliance headquarters, and it was already home to over 1 million beings from 60 different species. "Sometimes I think about the soldiers we lost," he said finally. "Good people who died, far from home." But then I see this. He gestured toward the playing children. Free beings living without fear. That's what we fought for. In the distance, construction crews were working on the new starport. Ships from across the galaxy brought trade goods, cultural exchanges, and news from the frontier. The latest reports spoke of human exploration fleets pushing into unknown regions, ready to face whatever threats might be lurking in the dark between stars. Dr. Sujin had been busy in the months since the war ended. Her biological research was now focused on healing rather than destruction. She worked with alien scientists to develop new medical treatments, combining human knowledge with discoveries from dozens of species. We're making remarkable progress, she had reported to the Alliance Council just last week. Rilani telepathic therapy combined with selenite bioregeneration can heal trauma that we thought was permanent. The children who survived Vorthak experimentation are going to be okay. That news had brought tears to the eyes of every parent in the galaxy. Engineer Yejun and technician Dongyun had started a very different kind of project. They were teaching alien species how to build human-style weapons and defenses, not for conquest, but for protection. The galaxy would never again be defenseless against monsters like the Vorthak. Every species should have the right to defend themselves, Yejun had explained to skeptical pacifist leaders. We're not building armies, we're building the tools of freedom. The transformation was visible everywhere. On Kepler 442b, Rilani cities rose from the ruins with crystalline spires that gleamed like stars. But now they also had human-designed orbital defense platforms and planetary shield generators, beauty and strength working together. The selenite moon colonies had expanded beyond their ice-covered oceans. New settlements on the surface combined aquatic habitat domes with defensive installations. The peaceful water dwellers were learning to be warriors when necessary. Even the mysterious resonance had changed. Their crystal ships now carried human weapons alongside their harmonic projectors. They sang new songs of defiance against tyranny, melodies that would inspire courage in any species that heard them. But perhaps the greatest change was in how the galaxy communicated. The Alliance had established a network of quantum transmitters that allowed instant communication across vast distances. Species that had been isolated for millennia were now sharing knowledge, art, and friendship. Admiral Tai Hyun had retired from military service to become the Alliance's first director of exploration. His job was to coordinate the search for other threatened species and hidden civilizations. Every week brought new discoveries as human scout ships pushed deeper into unexplored space. The galaxy is bigger than we thought, he had told the Council during his last briefing. Long-range sensors are detecting artificial signals from the galactic core region. There might be thousands of species we haven't contacted yet. That knowledge brought both hope and concern. If there were other advanced civilizations out there, perhaps some of them were threats as dangerous as the Vorthak had been. But the Alliance was ready. The network of free species grew stronger every day. On the rebuilt world of Proxima Prime, General Minji was training the first class of multi-species officers. Humans, Rilani, Selenites, and Resonants learned to fight together as a unified force. The old barriers of biology and culture were breaking down, as young beings discovered they had more in common than they had differences. The next generation won't see aliens when they look at each other, Minji had observed. They'll just see people. Back in the memorial garden, Yuna and Captain Hyun watched the sun set over the lunar landscape. Earth hung in the sky like a blue jewel, its lights twinkling with the activity of billions of beings from across the galaxy. What do you think comes next? Yuna asked. Hyun smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young officer who had first answered her desperate call for help. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. The Vorthak thought they could rule through fear and isolation. We've proven that freedom and cooperation are stronger. A message alert chimed on both their communicators. New signals had been detected from the edge of known space. Strange transmissions that might be distress calls from unknown species. The exploration fleets were already preparing to investigate. Yuna felt the familiar flutter of excitement in her chest. There were still people out there who needed help. Still worlds that might be suffering under tyranny. The work was far from over. "Shall we?" Yuna asked, gesturing toward the shuttle pad where their ship waited. Yuna nodded. They had responsibilities now that went beyond their original species. The Alliance needed experienced commanders who understood the cost of freedom and the price of peace. As they walked toward their ship, alien children waved goodbye from the garden. Human kids called out promises to save them pieces of birthday cake when they returned. It was such a small thing, but it represented everything they had fought for. The galaxy was no longer a dark place where civilizations died alone and afraid. It was becoming a community where different species protected each other and shared their dreams. And somewhere in the vast emptiness between stars, new ships bearing human markings and alliance symbols were pushing into the unknown. They carried weapons for fighting and supplies for healing. They were ready for war but hoped for peace. The message was simple and had already become famous across 1,000 worlds. This is the Galactic Liberation Alliance. We're here to help. Behind them, the children continued to play under alien stars, building sandcastles that reached toward impossible futures. They would grow up in a galaxy where freedom was not a dream, but a promise, kept by those who had come before. The darkness had tried to win, but hope had arrived just in time, carried by soldiers who refused to let evil triumph, and everything had changed forever.